Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something quite fascinating.
Yes, we're looking at excerpts from a YouTube transcript from the Mohammedan Way Sufi Realities. It features teachings by Sheikh Nurjan Miramati.
And the focus is really on, well, preparedness. Looking at signs of difficult times, maybe even what the source calls the last days, and how belief and certain practices can offer protection.
Exactly. It's a very specific perspective.
So our mission here is to kind of unpack the key insights from this source, maybe flag some surprising points, and pull out the practical advice that you can take away about being ready for challenging times.
We're aiming to guide you through this particular viewpoint, showing you what's presented in this material.
Okay, so where do we start? The source kicks off with something pretty attention-grabbing.
It really does. It talks about a press conference. High-ranking officials, French and U.S. government apparently, holding a joint announcement.
And they gave a specific warning.
Yes, the source says they warned of catastrophic weather conditions coming within 500 days. That's quite precise.
Okay, 500 days. And the source points out when that landed.
It does. It says if you tracked it from the announcement, that 500th day was September 23rd, 2015.
Wow. And here's where the source brings in that spiritual dimension, right?
Exactly. It notes that this specific date, September 23rd, 2015, well, it coincided with major religious days. The Day of Atonement for, as the source puts it, their cousins, meaning the Jewish tradition, and also Yom al-Arafah for Muslims.
That's quite a convergence.
It is. But what's really interesting is the source's emphasis here. It's not actually about why those officials chose that date or if the prediction was scientifically accurate or the politics behind it.
Right. The source says something like, why they came out with that date is not for us.
Precisely. The focus isn't the prediction itself.
So what is the takeaway then, according to the source?
It's the fact that such a stark warning was given externally by people in positions of authority. For someone with spiritual understanding, this acts as a kind of confirmation.
Like an external sign validating what they already sense or have been taught.
Exactly. It validates the warnings that spiritual teachers, like the one in this source, are constantly giving about, significant shifts and difficulties ahead. It's like the physical world echoing a spiritual truth.
Okay, that makes sense. So these external signs point towards this core teaching in the source about preparedness.
Yes, living a life of preparedness. That's central.
And it's based on more than just, say, stocking up supplies.
Much more. It's rooted in the belief that this dunya, this material world, is fundamentally temporary. It has a beginning, so it must have an end. That's just its nature.
And this belief really pushes against just, assuming everything will continue as is or thinking major changes are centuries away.
Absolutely. The source contrasts saying, it's 500 years away with how Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, taught his companions. He taught them to live as if the end was, tomorrow.
Wow. That must have created a powerful mindset.
Immensely powerful. It instilled what the source calls yaqeen, this deep, unwavering certainty in their hearts. It wasn't just intellectual belief that they felt they could almost see the signs of the last days. They lived with this profound sense of imminence.
And that led to a specific way of living, a balance.
Yes, a really crucial balance. The teaching mentioned is to pray all night as if the world is ending tomorrow. Total focus on the spiritual, the inevitable end, devotion.
Okay, intense spiritual focus.
And at the same time, work hard all day as if it's going to go forever. So, attending to your worldly responsibilities, paying bills, earning a living, it's not about neglecting the physical.
That's a really interesting tension, and Imam Ali, peace be upon him, confirmed this.
Yes, the source mentions his confirmation of this balance, emphasizing how the nighttime conviction fuels the spiritual effort.
And the source brings this right back to the individual listener, doesn't it? It's not just about some huge global event.
Exactly. It says, essentially, the fact that my own world can end is enough. In the morning, I don't wake up. Preparedness becomes immediately relevant when you think about your own mortality. You don't need the whole world to end.
Right. But does this intense belief mean you just sit back and wait? How does action fit in?
Good question. The source tackles this directly with a story, a classic anecdote, really. The man on the roof during a flood.
Oh, yeah, I think I know this one. The water's rising.
Right. First boat comes by. Get in, we'll save you. The man says, no, I trust in God.
Okay.
Water gets higher. Second boat. Same offer, maybe more urgent, same refusal. I trust in God, maybe even a third attempt.
And eventually,
the water takes him.
and the punchline comes later.
In the source is telling, yes. He supposedly gets to heaven and asks, "Oh my Lord, I had so much faith in you. Why didn't you help me?"
And the answer.
"I sent 3 boats to help you."
Wow. That really lands the point.
It does. Trust in Allah Almighty isn't passive. It involves taking the means, the help that He provides. So these warnings, these signs, the guidance from teachers, the source frames them as part of Allah Almighty's Rahmah, His mercy. They are the boats He sends to guide people how to prepare.
So recognizing the signs is part of acting on that trust. What kind of signs does the source highlight? It uses the term azab.
Yes, azab, which can mean difficulty, tribulation, divine punishment, maybe. And it points to specific alamat or signs.
Like what, for example?
Some are quite disturbing. One is a loss of basic humanity, people watching and sharing videos of horrific tortures, almost like a spectator sport.
Really, that's seen as a sign.
Yes, and the source warns that watching that kind of thing, that azab can spiritually dress you, affect you negatively. It references the story of Lot's wife looking back at the destruction, being told, "Azab is not town, don't look. Turn away, don't be fascinated by it."
So there's a spiritual danger in consuming that kind of content.
That's the message. Other signs mentioned are more physical, like natural disasters. Widespread floods are described almost poetically as the dunya, the earth itself, rejecting people, saying, "I don't want these people anymore, I want to drown them."
And earthquakes.
Similar idea. The earth saying, "I don't want them on me, I'm going to shake and bury them."
So these aren't just geological or meteorological events in this view. They're signals.
They're framed as alamut, yeah. Powerful signals that intense difficulty is manifesting, getting closer.
Okay, so if you recognize these signs, these alamut of azab, what does the source say you should do, practically speaking?
It translates directly into practical steps. It's not just about feeling worried, it's about action.
Like basic supplies.
Definitely. Having essentials at home, food that lasts, cooking oil, batteries for light, blankets for warmth, the fundamentals.
And there was that very specific advice about shoes.
Yes. I found that really striking. Keep sturdy shoes right by your door. Always.
Why shoes specifically?
Because, the source explains, during an earthquake, so many serious injuries are cuts to the feet from broken glass, people trying to get out barefoot or in floozy slippers. So the advice is memorable. Live like a fireman. Put your shoes at the door. Ready to go instantly.
That makes so much sense. What about an emergency bag?
Yeah, a small grab-and-go bag. Basics. A towel, maybe some underwear, high-energy, non-perishables like butter or peanut butter, crackers, definitely batteries.
And the source even points to official resources.
It does. It mentions government emergency websites like FEMA in the U.S. as places that list what you should put in an emergency bag. It uses this as a kind of parallel. Just as there's official guidance for physical preparedness, there's spiritual guidance too.
And taking these practical steps isn't seen as lacking faith, is it?
Quite the opposite. It's presented as Zayn al-Iman, the beauty or maybe the adornment of faith. Doing these things shows you actually believe the warnings, you have conviction in what Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, and the spiritual guides are saying about potential difficulties. It's faith in action.
Okay, now the source moves into something a bit more abstract. This idea of barzakh and a thinning veil.
Yeah, this is where it gets into deeper, maybe more challenging spiritual concepts. Barzakh reality is described as, well, another dimension of yourself, a reality of your soul that exists sort of parallel to your physical body.
So there's like a physical me and a barzakh me.
That's the idea. And there's a constant connection. This barzakh reality, which could be nurani, meaning full of light based on your spiritual state, or it could be from the depths of fire, very negative, is always sending out its naza.
Naza. What's that exactly?
Think of it like its influence, its gaze, its energetic pull. It's constantly trying to affect your physical self here on earth, kind of like a magnet, pulling you towards its own state, positive or negative.
Okay. And how does this relate to the idea of the last days?
The teaching here is that as we get closer to those prophesied times, the dimensions themselves become very close. The veil between them thins.
So the signal gets stronger.
Exactly. The signal of barzakh, that influence from your other reality, is easier to receive. It has a more powerful effect on your physical self. The spiritual world is pressing more intensely onto the physical, and believing it's the last days helps you tune into that, to step into the reality of the Akira, the hereafter.
The source gives some really stark examples of this influence, right?
Extremely vivid. On the negative side, it points to things like people getting tattoos of symbols. It considers negative scorpions, snakes, spiders.
And the source asks why someone would do that.
Yeah, it asks, who feels in their right mind inspired to put these images on their body. It suggests this is a sign that their negative Barzakh reality has influenced them so much that their physical appearance starts to resemble their reality in that other dimension. They're being dressed by it.
Manifesting outwardly what's happening inwardly or in that other dimension.
Precisely. And the positive side, holy people radiating light. That's seen as their soul's reality, their Nurani Barzakh, dressing their physicality, or people feeling intense energy or peace in majlis of zikr, gatherings for remembering Allah Almighty. That feeling is the Barzakh being dressed by light as the veils are opening.
Wow. And there's a warning connected to this. Something about Switzerland.
Yes, the source mentions a possibility and frames it as a potential danger linked to something potentially opening, maybe related to experiments in Switzerland creating an energy field that could literally open a door to these unseen realities much more dramatically.
And the concern is?
The concern describes as, well, if, say, 99% of people's Barzakh reality is already demonic, reflecting their negative actions and attachments, what happens if that door fully opens? What happens if shayateen demonic entities can fully dress people, overtake their physical bodies? The source even references a pastime during Satan's elimination where it says this kind of thing happened.
That's a heavy concept.
Mm-hmm.
So, faced with all this external signs, practical needs, the thinning veil, potential negative influences, what's the protection? What's the solution offered?
The core protection emphasized repeatedly is participation in modalis of zikr. These gatherings focused on the remembrance of Allah Almighty. And equally crucial, modalis of the love of Sayyidina Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him.
Gatherings centered on love for the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him.
Yes. And how do these help? The source explains they build iman, they strengthen your faith, they build light within you, and fundamentally they build the protection.
So participating sincerely acts like a spiritual shield.
That's the essence. You become dressed by that light, blessed by that light. It's about transformation and connection, providing safety.
Are there other practices mentioned alongside these gatherings?
Yes. Keeping the company of people of light is mentioned. Also, reciting specific phrases like Ya Rijalallah, which calls upon the awliya, the friends of Allah Almighty, and of course continually sending praises upon Sayyidina Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him.
And the timing is crucial here, right? These aren't just fair weather practices.
Absolutely not. The source is very clear. This isn't just for when you have blue skies and McDonald's. These practices are most vital precisely when azab, difficulty, and horrific events are unfolding. That's when you need that spiritual strength and protection the most.
And there's a claim about the effectiveness of this.
A strong claim. That people genuinely engaged in zikr and who cultivate that deep love for Sayyidina Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, experience what the source calls miraculous protection. They can be shielded from difficulties that might devastate others.
Which really brings us back to the power of belief itself.
Exactly. The source argues it's actually beneficial to our faith to believe it, to believe these times of difficulty, maybe the last days, are near, not to dismiss it.
Not necessarily about predicting the future perfectly, but about the internal effect of that belief.
Precisely. Believing it helps you step more into the reality of Akhira, the hereafter. Your whole orientation starts to shift.
How does that shift happen? What's the mechanism?
Well, if you genuinely see the signs, if you believe the material world, the dunya, is showing its temporary or even rotten nature, then your attachment to it, your hope in it, your love for it naturally starts to decrease.
Your desire for worldly things weakens.
Right. And when that desire for dunya drops, the source says your natural attraction will be for Akira, for the eternal, for connection with the divine presence. People of Iman gain this nur of Iman, this light of faith, and a powerful love for Allah Almighty and for Sayyidina Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessing be upon him.
There was a metaphor used. Something at an iron sheet.
Yes, a very strong image. Desire for dunya is like an iron sheet, blocking the heart, preventing the love of Allah Almighty and Sayyidina Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, from fully entering.
So when the desire lessens, the sheet lifts.
The sheet drops. And then your choices become correct. Your feet, as the source puts it, naturally want to take you to the majlis of zikr. Rather than being pulled towards distraction symbolized by something like dancing, your inclinations change.
So really the core message is that embracing this perspective, even if the timing isn't exact, is spiritually beneficial anyway.
That seems to be the crux of it. The worst outcome of taking this advice seriously is that your faith deepens, your attachment to fleeting things weakens, and your connection to the eternal strengthens, which, from the source's perspective, is exactly what helps you draw closer to Allah Almighty no matter what's happening externally.
You don't need the apocalypse tomorrow to benefit from detaching from worldly desires today.
As the source concludes that thought, you don't need the whole world to end to be close to Allah Almighty. You need your desires for that world to end.
That really lands with impact. So we've covered quite a journey here, unpacking these teachings from Shak Nurjan Mirmati via the transcript, from external warnings as spiritual validation,
to the call for both practical and deep spiritual preparedness,
the idea of the unseen barzakh influencing the seen,
and the protection found in remembrance of Allah Almighty and love for Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessing be upon him.
It's definitely a unique and thought-provoking perspective.
Absolutely. Diving into specific sources like this really does offer new ways to think about faith, reality, and how we navigate our lives.
Okay, so maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over after this deep dive, building on what we've discussed. If our inner state, our barzakh reality as the source calls it, is truly influencing our physical experience, especially as dimensions potentially draw closer, how does actively working to build light and spiritual strength within ourselves change not just our inner world, but how we actually perceive and handle the challenges we encounter out here in the physical world right now?
Something to reflect on. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking knowledge from the many perspectives available.